61. I wish to talk with residents of India, in particular New Delhi. You are deep into my speeches that emphasize American government corruption so harmful to people across the world. Your leaders are every bit as business-fouled and dangerous. Crop burning season escalates your air pollution to the worst in the world. Authorities warn you to stay indoors, not only impossible, but the deadly air leaks in. Children deep cough from the chest and are regularly sick. Heart attacks skyrocket, and the aging get severe dementia and die early, because smoke and other tiny toxins fill not just lungs, but every body cell. All companies that profit from polluting without costly measures to reduce it are allowed to secretly pay politicians campaign money in return for twisting every law to enrich the small number of industrial bribers while deliberately letting the powerless 99% suffer and die who don't pay to play. Car and bus manufacturers kill laws to cut emissions and increase mileage, and long delay conversion to electric power. Factories save a bundle with filthy smokestacks. Small and big business farmers cheaply prepare harvested fields for next plantings by burning until hundreds of millions choke and sicken. Their campaign bribe money and vote power kill any law to stop crop burning. Nuclear and conventional weapons get million rupee government contracts for every 1,000 in legislator bribes, paying for campaign commercials, whipping up fear of and hate for Pakistan. Meanwhile, global warming, ever worsened by pollution, reduces India's regular rain into dying lakes and rivers and onto crops. Water, ever less available, is only rationed, but idiot managers will soon be unable to divide up rivers and lakes vanished to dried, cracked mud. In scores of your cities, water faucets now spit dust. Legislators and executives only surviving elections with bribes from polluters and weaponeers who listen to thousands of appeals from the powerless who don't secretly pay them will, of course, continue to let you suffer and die as they have for decades. You can only make them leave private service to return to constitutional public service with your courtroom revolution. My general ideas and laws you've listened to, but now let's scheme Indians' federal lawsuit strategy. Demand nuclear and conventional disarmament negotiations with Pakistan, a most unnecessary enemy. Every other national citizen life or death rescue project and lawsuit requires all the huge sums now wasted building arsenals and paying troops to foment war. Sue to ban every single rupee privately paid to politicians, leaving them public salaries and equal public tax-funded campaign finance only. Sue to outlaw all field burning. Demand that legislators spend war money instead to help farmers prepare fields without destroying 1.3 billion human bodies and their 2.6 billion lungs. Sue to require cars and buses to presently cut emissions and soon go electric, while simultaneously demanding that legislators vote major federal help for manufacturers if they want one more vote from you. Make courts and legislators develop new freshwater sources. May I suggest your courtroom strategy for the nothing is possible without it private gifts to leaders, total ban. Prove that thousands of lawmakers twist all government law and support to enable polluters to maximum harm. Then prove by diligent research that these exact profiteering fat cats funnel vast funds into the campaign kitties of every documented filth-voting legislator. Force the judge to listen to dozens of the perpetrators lie that public savaging legislation and sweetheart non-regulation was not bought and paid for. No problem, perjury and bribery charges are coming, except you haven't quite proven your case. So bring in a smaller group of legislator witnesses who finally voted to disempower the polluters when their own children sickened from their poisoning. Ask each what suddenly happened to their dirty money when they voted no to dirty laws. Was not every rupee yanked over to pro-pollution opponents suddenly enriched to lie to victory? In many cases. Then invoke the jurist's own family. Judge, if you cannot outlaw private campaign cash from your passion for constitutional public service, protection, and rights, then do it to save your very own children's and parents' health and lives. Your Honor, we've learned that in America, even many judges are selected and influenced by corporate payments to public authorities to twist most decisions to merely enrich the overpowerful, never mind the most horrific general public harm resulting. Of course, trashing every word of our general welfare, rights, and protection Constitution. Folks, research many judges for such corruption. Not that hard when a number got elected through earlier careers with corporate money quite evidently influencing their decisions for the jackals and against the Constitution they swore to uphold. Then pick clean judges to hear your suits. Remember, survival of 8 billion will only be empowered by leaders never again refusing to care for us because they were paid not to. Today's radio interview was with two famous, accomplished academics who at least intended to illuminate our hopes for some controlling, civilizing solution to Palestinian and Israeli savagery against civilian multitudes. One man headed a great university school of world security. The other authored a book on the entire history of laws of war protecting civilians. The interviewer added his queries to the topic. How might the skyrocketing attacks on innocent non-combatants, mostly women and children, ever be slowed, indeed stopped? First, they reviewed the century of new international law against food, water, and other life support sieges, and laws forbidding both direct violence against civilians and all force against soldiers so massive that it will kill large numbers of non-combatants nearby. Neither intellectual noted that it is the greatest and most aggressive military powers who usually refuse to sign such conventions or grossly disobey them if they have. The author deeply regretted that these great powers commit such crimes against humanity while denying all moral and legal responsibility and refusing prosecution and punishment too. He solemnly recommended that Russia, America, and Israel stop all the savagery or accept full penalty if they do not. Apparently, he was not aware that 10,000 years of total population war freaks have always been begged to be lawful and civilized. Pretty please! While the perps never stopped rolling on the floor, laughing themselves sick. The eggheads did agree that ever greater quantities of ever bigger blast bombs waste many helpless innocents for every soldier. But then for every cause of war that I went 25 hours insane exploring, your very human but very strict laws against. These sages never researched nor advocated a single mandatory reform for. In this lengthy, supposed problem resolution exploration, not a word was said about when and why peace was destroyed for war, savaging billions of civilians for 10 unbroken millennia. Neither interviewed had a peep to say about how death merchants force government purchases, nor that 110 years of peace, arms ban, or control negotiations were all entirely fraudulent public relations spin by the players who sincerely, if secretly, plotted instead another lucrative, powerful century of weapons piling to the moon and explosion on another 250 million, then 8 billion innocents. Had they just reviewed true past and future war reality, the chin strokers would have been forced to admit that booty-driven weaponeers will only ever be dragged, kicking and screaming, by hard law to stop selling world murder. Won't you please my ass? Let's be amazed that 1 million 3-degree world peace researchers didn't open a single one of 10,000 books detailing how legal, uncontrolled weapons manufacture and marketing is war, evermore against civilians. For example, the 80 billion kill capacity nuclear arsenals. And doesn't it take your breath away that nowhere across 5,000 universities is war sales 100% converse? Great Armament and Armies Treaty ban even mentioned, much less realized the obvious definition and achievement of world peace itself. Not to mention the prevention of 1,000 of every 1,000 civilian slaughters. From class day 1 to doctoral theses, so-called war and peace analysts remain utterly disinterested in causation of and solution design for the billion murder problem. Did one ever ask another? Suppose disarmament, except light border defense, had been enforced since 1915. Would hammers, steak knives, and chokeholds still have killed 300 million by now? No? What does that tell you that we have to do now? Well, duh! So why do 8 billion stay ignorant of this burning truth? Because we are relentlessly hate and war propagandized by the weapon-selling, power-playing profiteers themselves, of course, whose every bribed dollar springs weapons contracts totaling trillions out of your ill-afforded, worse-than-wasted taxes. Publishers, how many long shelves full of war history and future books have you sold? Mostly just juggling mighty weapons and armies to advantage the author's favorite nation's big dogs. They also advise to trim the civilian slaughter 5 to 10% to clean up their reputations and political prospects. Exactly the world-impressing press releases of the U.S. Secretary of State while emphasizing Israel's hallowed right of self-defense, consisting of smearing tens of thousands more Palestinian children into mountains of American-bombed cement. How many far more important nuclear studies have you also published that detail ever higher doomsday odds, but also fail to mention, much less legally describe, the disarmament of conventional excess grows and eventually blasts the nuclear that not a single corrupted leader would support without confiscation of their weaponeers' bribes by a mighty civilian revolution from family guardians who finally refuse to lie down another day for their own murder? Publishers, you've filled millions of libraries, including mine, with war tracts that only enhance weaponeering's hundreds of strategies, motivated by money, power, and hate. But everyone limits any stray, scarce, voluntary, vague, undetailed peace proposal to pretty please. Why? Because it's way too much brain sweat and trouble for you or your stadium full of scribes to actually figure out why the mass murder, how to stop it, and which old and new laws, how enforced, by who. I did, but it took this pathetic punk 57 years. You will refuse to publish my single 1,000% opposite of complacent enablers nothing if you are also content to remain a giant part of the dead-brained, dead ethics, doomed humanity problem. The hell with my solution, everybody's, yours, that promises to have the only chance of saving your family with your help. Right? Tell me, did your last 100 institutionalized war books include a single bestseller? Can you even imagine that our lately desperate, infuriated, dying world is just now ready to act, to lawfully save ourselves, when it's finally clear that not one corrupt, power-grubbing leader has given or ever will give a shit or lift a finger for our families and future? Only you can save the world and your children. Will cause you which problem? Sluggish sales or frantic resupply? If you really believed that you could do what everybody alive wants to do, save your family while making a ton of money, honey, wouldn't you just do it? Damn right you would. What are you, crazy? Stupid? Down here in Texas, we had a silly kiddie comedy star, Ernest P. Worrell, known for his wrinkly, rolling rubber smirk and cornpone drawl. Sometimes when he felt a touch pissed, a little dissed, he asked, "Do I look like I have stupid written all over my face?" Now, how'd you guess that's why I make audios, never videos? Ending war seems prohibitively complicated. A myriad analysts consider 1,000 factors. A confused multitude appeals to the armed, angry, and ambitious. Stop! For God's sake and ours! Will warriors volunteer peace? Of course not. So who will make law to enforce nonviolence legally, but also practically, physically? Certainly not legislators and executives mentally and emotionally twisted by our nation and our religion and power and bribed to turn over trillions, our taxes, by campaign cash from our weapons companies. None of them will ever introduce, much less pass and sign, solid peace law. So what about an international peace treaty driven by a world family love and care movement to flat halt each major cause of war? Certainly the obsession of my book, because so far all treaties have only juggled 80 billion kill power, whined about civilian slaughter, or grandly, if vaguely pledged, universal, nuclear, and conventional disarmament, all with zero scheduling or enforcement mechanisms, and weirdly left in place and in blooming, invulnerable health, each and every damned easy to identify military, business, power, and hateful, crazy, false propaganda cause of war. Let's cut to the chase with one last story that I actually already told you most of. Hamas spent decades building hundreds of miles of tunnels under Gaza, exactly to hide revolutionary guerrilla fighters from the long-expected American bomb and tank surface obliteration by Israeli invaders. Soon, most tunnels and fighters will be obliterated, just not decades more violent resistance to power and profit players also happy to persist forever. My book heavily details commercialized international war and demands that weaponeering be gone from government and commerce. I insist that attack armies and weapons also disappear by law. I have not similarly explored the history of domestic, in-nation militarized tyranny, but the story is easy enough to tell from sixth grade history, for Pete's sake. For most of war's 10,000-year history, government was one-man military dictatorship, monarchy. Do you want an empire? Devote your career to invasion war. Need slavish domestic obedience? Tax them for their own military slavery costs. Keep them on the farm or in the army. Recruit nobles living on serf labor, and your mega military crushes any miserable revolt. That is until sometimes rival militias kill the king and raise up a new one. Never defeated are hate, bigotry, tyranny, military dictatorship, anti-democracy, and the weapons business, gluing all those evil elements into a worldwide phalanx of violent oppression. Now along come people's revolutions that attempted to enthrone democratic constitutions, mandating only defensive, not attack war, declared by representatives of the people, always choosing protection of themselves, not risking everything alive by crazy foreign attack. Unfortunately, every framer's goal and law of love, care, and respect was never backed up, realized, and enforced with international disarmament law, universal voting rights law, and education against hate, bigotry, and tyranny. Thus, our failure to conduct Jeffersonian crisis alteration of violent rubber government to again effect our safety and happiness. Then our Constitution ordered general, not special business welfare remains endlessly trashed without any successful resistance of the people, still mostly brainwashed by deliberately crafted propaganda from power players' bigoted culture of war, hate, tyranny, and superiority. Now in small to giant power nations, essentially the same top dog 1% players crushing the rest financially and militarily, this corrupt system rules, elevated by religion and ethnic upper classes fouling life for every different inferior underclass. You do notice that my treaties full democracy, peace, and anti-corruption and humanity education laws are directly designed and enforced to steadily, progressively stop all that laissez-faire law of the truly nasty human jungle cold. My 25 hours of war stories, like the permanent destruction of Gaza after the crazed rebels' one-day war on Israeli innocents, are in total one story of the world weapons business bigotry and hate education, at least obliquely encouraged in most schools. About the failure of democracy law to be enforced nationally and internationally, leaving corrupt tyrannies destroying self-rule and launching every one of 1,000 international invasions also. Civil wars to battle dictatorships and world fight back against invasion thus all escalate to the end without any effective people and government legal revolution against military, environmental, and life support doomsdays. Not one public or government figure ever even tries to solve war because no one ever agreed on what causes it. And how ridiculous and insane is that? Because just about every single war and abuse of power story in his story points giant black arrows at very few stunningly obvious causes, therefore cures too. So why don't you pull the effortless, crystal clear few gems out of my 25-hour rant? War is hate, tyranny, and weapons business purchase of governments. Peace is love, disarmament, democracy, and business kicked out of government. Easily enough taught by any, no, all schools, and instituted by 3 minutes a day public agitation from every parent whose other 16 private hours can no longer keep themselves, their children, and parents alive. 400 generations tried begging. Now you make the laws. Give me credit. I wrote them down and said who makes them and how. I'm neither happy nor confident to ask you to work for so many new laws and government programs. Keep your eyes on your emergency needs, preventing nuclear war and sustaining water and food supply. Attack hardest the worst dangers. If we're tremendously lucky, missiles stupidly allowed to remain might not all blast from silos for a decade or two. Water and food supply, though, are doomed as I speak. Not if, not when, just fast and certain as hell. America's biggest reservoir is a few years from useless. The Mississippi River keeps dropping below historic low. World 25-year drought dooms lakes, rivers, farms, and forests everywhere. 2022's 9 million starved to death and 67 million driven from mostly water and food-deprived homes will escalate every year. Your rescue actions will remain fatally deficient unless you first simply observe, reason, and plan. Your war leaders demand that every weapon of world catastrophe remain to buttress righteous sides of conflicts. No, doomsday is invited because they must hang on to bribes, profits, and power in the ever-shrinking meantime. Your water and farm managers prepare draconian rationing of water-bodied dregs until quickly gone. Then they'll bow out to the rich and well-armed, seizing about 2 more years of life support amid billions of corpses. Then, from every terrorized government fighting desperate resource wars, explodes conventional to nuclear war to put us all out of our misery. Although nuclear winter, freezing to death, ain't exactly a quick, peaceful checkout. Remember our radio telescope scan of 10 million high-tech experiments receives dead silence because the 1 in 1,000 who reversed this death programming stopped radioing out to hide from nuclear monopoly galactic invaders, the other 1 of 1,000 survivors. Okay, time to think. New water supply to farms, forests, lakes, and us would take that swords into plowshares, $10 trillion disarmament, and army demobilization savings. All non-existent from leaders bribed to spend and borrow damn near every tax dollar to benefit their true industrial bosses. Hence your work for the anti-bribery, pro-public campaign finance, disarmament treaty, water collecting and delivery, CO2 air scrubbing, and all other emergency projects requiring lawsuits, legislation, and swords into plowshares treaty tenets. Fail to boom the movement, including love and survival education, and you and I die smart but lonely without the billion other activists allowing us a few well-deserved little vacations. Get the pick, Rick? Yes, you can. And before you tell me that I'm asking everyone to jump on my utopian, idealist fantasies, have you heard that the few nations who do restrict their armed forces to necessary defense from, not invasion of, an overarmed world, and maximize voting rights and ability, and deny corporate and interest groups financial power to buy political favor, and the damn politicians themselves, and answer the educated population majority's desperate need of full medical and environmental care and protection? Are, of course, the rather few nations with the most equality, democracy, freedom of choice, best quality of life, and longest, happiest lifespans, too. Yet even those champion humanity nations cannot, on their enlightened own, drive world cooperation to destroy every earthling's war and weapons doomsday threat, nor enlist the help of 8 billion to slash CO2 emissions, scrub out atmosphere CO2 excess, or develop new freshwater sources to save farms and forests, thus minimizing otherwise desperate, crushing migrant invasion of especially the good citizen care countries. Just as the kindest, sanest people are doomed by abusive, crazy national leadership, So the loveliest, most well-led nations will soon perish anyway from a terminally sick world's arms and war explosion. 125-degree summers, dying migrant overrun, and world economic collapse, all decisively solving global warming with 2-year, 28 degrees nuclear winter. So only that border defenses only, swords into plowshares treaty will work if you work it, as the 12-steppers say. I really must end your book without further attacking and insulting you and scare you to life, not death. Don't you know that my most terrifying warnings only prove my love, darling? Every day until my last, I'll be asking for your help writing, negotiating, and realizing our world treaty and associated national lawsuits and activism. Impossibly tough, you speculate? Well, what about the forbiddingly arduous and complex 10,000-year world domination project by the billion military and financial power manipulators so successfully fooling, coercing, and often ruining kind and respectful humanity, outnumbering them at least 8-1? All you need to accomplish is simple legal reversal of the precise evils the fallen ones taught us are the exact problems. Early in your effort, you'll educate, organize, and galvanize voters to replace dirty leaders with our own, already in love with humanity's laws before their first days in office. Don't you understand that just your steady effort to begin, multiply, and continue preordains our humanity rescue? Even if a full, scary, touch-and-go century of your unbroken campaigns must follow. Can we agree that your fabulous, infinite, positive power, not my howling doom, is how I'll blow you off the couch, inspiring your jump start, love? Now, take over, honey. Just get cracking today before your 8-year-old girl looks up from the last bottle of water and can of tuna you scraped out of your bare pantry and asks, "Mommy and Daddy, didn't you see the white flash in our window? And don't you know what that mushroom cloud and roaring sound mean?" All you can say then is, "Let us hold you in our arms, dear, for your last 10 seconds and tell you how sorry we are for not stopping this a few years ago when we had a little time and a decent chance."